U.S. Army Tank Destroyer Development Program, 1941–1942, September 1944. Eastern France. German armored forces operating in the Vosges region reported engagement durations with American tank destroyers averaging under 3 minutes before the enemy vehicles withdrew at speeds exceeding 50 miles per hour. Wehrmacht after-action reports from this period documented a tactical problem that defied conventional armored warfare doctrine. This is the story of the M18 Hellcat, the fastest tracked armored vehicle of World War II, and how its operational deployment forced a fundamental reassessment of armored combat principles. If you appreciate evidence-based military history with primary source documentation, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. The origins of American tank destroyer doctrine trace to 1941, when the War Department analyzed German armored operations in Poland and France. Major General Andrew Bruce, appointed to command the newly established Tank Destroyer Center at Camp Hood, Texas, proposed a controversial operational concept. Rather than matching German armor production tank for tank, Bruce advocated for specialized, highly mobile anti-tank units that could respond rapidly to armored breakthroughs. Bruce's tactical philosophy, documented in Tank Destroyer Center publications from 1941 to 42, rejected the defensive mindset of towed anti-tank guns. He envisioned mobile formations that would actively hunt enemy armor, using speed and maneuverability to achieve favorable engagement conditions. The analogy to naval destroyers, fast, lightly protected vessels designed to intercept and destroy larger warships, informed the doctrinal framework. War Department planning documents from this period specified performance requirements for a new generation of tank destroyers: maximum road speed of at least 40 miles per hour, sufficient firepower to defeat medium tank armor at 1,000 yards, and a hull design prioritizing mobility over protection. These specifications represented a calculated departure from the armor-heavy philosophy dominating contemporary tank design. Initial procurement efforts focused on turreted tank destroyers mounting the 3-inch M7 gun. However, ordnance officers recognized that even greater speed and a more powerful main armament would provide operational advantages. By mid-1942, requirements evolved to include a 76mm high-velocity gun and a target road speed exceeding 50 miles per hour, performance parameters that seemed unrealistic given the limitations of existing tracked vehicle technology. Buick Motor Division Design and Engineering. 1942–1943. The development contract for what would become the M18 went to Buick Motor Division, part of General Motors' extensive wartime conversion program. The project's chief engineer, J. Edward Campbell, brought automotive racing experience to the assignment, a background that proved instrumental in the vehicle's final design philosophy. Campbell's engineering team approached the project from first principles rather than incrementally modifying existing tank destroyer designs. They began with the chassis and suspension system of the M24 Chaffee light tank, then systematically eliminated weight wherever possible. The design process inverted traditional military vehicle development. Instead of starting with armor requirements and adding mobility, Campbell's team started with a mobility target and added only essential armor. The prototype, designated T-70, emerged from the Detroit Arsenal in July 1943. Technical specifications documented by Army Ordnance evaluators recorded a combat weight of 17 tons, nearly half that of the M4 Sherman medium tank. The Continental R975 radial engine, originally designed for aircraft applications, generated 400 horsepower. Initial test runs at Aberdeen Proving Ground achieved road speeds that exceeded design specifications. Campbell incorporated several innovations derived from automobile racing. The torsion bar suspension system used components borrowed from racing car designs, providing superior cross-country performance compared to conventional tracked vehicle suspensions. The power-to-weight ratio, approximately 23.5 horsepower per ton, exceeded any contemporary tracked combat vehicle in Allied or Axis service. Army Ordnance engineers initially expressed concern about structural durability at high speeds. Test programs subjected prototypes to accelerated wear trials, simulating thousands of miles of operation across varied terrain. Results indicated that the suspension and drivetrain could sustain the mechanical stresses of high-speed operation, though maintenance requirements would be higher than conventional tanks. The open-top turret design generated controversy during development. Conventional military thinking held that enclosed turrets provided essential crew protection. Campbell's team argued that eliminating the turret roof saved approximately 3 tons of weight that translated directly to higher speed and better acceleration. Additionally, the open design improved crew situational awareness and simplified ammunition handling. Wind tunnel testing and ergonomic studies suggested that the open turret provided acceptable crew protection against small arms fire and artillery fragments while offering significant operational advantages. The design philosophy accepted vulnerability to direct hits as unavoidable. If enemy guns were engaging your position, speed of withdrawal mattered more than armor thickness. M18 Production and Armament Systems. 1943-1944 Buick's Flint, Michigan facility commenced full production in January 1944. The assembly line, converted from automobile manufacturing, incorporated mass production techniques that enabled rapid delivery of completed vehicles. By March 1944, the first combat-ready M18 tank destroyers were completing acceptance trials and being shipped to training facilities. The primary armament consisted of the 76mm M1A1 or M1A2 gun, a high-velocity weapon capable of defeating German medium tank armor at typical engagement ranges. Ballistic performance, as documented in Army technical manuals, included a muzzle velocity of 2,600 feet per second with armor-piercing ammunition. At 1,000 yards, the weapon could penetrate approximately 4 inches of face-hardened armor plate, sufficient to defeat the frontal armor of Panzer IV tanks and the side armor of Panther tanks. The hydraulic turret traverse system represented a significant advancement over manually cranked traverse mechanisms used in earlier American tank destroyers. Borrowed from naval gun mount designs, the hydraulic system enabled a full 360-degree turret rotation in approximately 20 seconds, roughly 3 times faster than hand-cranked systems. This capability proved crucial for engaging targets from any direction without repositioning the entire vehicle. Fire control equipment included telescopic gun sights and a coincidence rangefinder. While less sophisticated than the optical systems in German tanks, American fire control provided adequate accuracy at typical engagement ranges. Crew training emphasized rapid target acquisition and quick firing solutions rather than precise long-range gunnery. Ammunition stowage accommodated 45 rounds of 76mm ammunition in various types: armor-piercing, high-explosive, and smoke. Standard combat loads emphasized armor-piercing rounds, with high-explosive shells for engaging soft targets and smoke rounds for screening withdrawals. Secondary armament consisted of a 50-caliber M2 Browning heavy machine gun mounted on the turret for anti-aircraft and anti-personnel use. A bow-mounted .30 caliber machine gun provided additional defensive capability. Communication equipment included an SCR 510 radio for vehicle-to-vehicle and command communications. Reliable radio communication proved essential for coordinating the dispersed operations characteristic of tank destroyer doctrine. Production continued through October 1944, with total M18 production reaching 2,507 vehicles. This represented only a fraction of total American armored vehicle production, but provided sufficient vehicles to equip approximately 40 tank destroyer battalions by mid-1944. U.S. Tank Destroyer Battalions European Theater. June-August 1944 M18 equipped tank destroyer battalions began arriving in the European Theater of Operations in June 1944, immediately following the Normandy invasion. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, one of the first units to deploy with the M18, entered combat in early August during the Allied breakout from the Normandy hedgerows. Tank destroyer battalions operated with considerable independence compared to conventional tank units. Standard organization included 3 companies of 12 M18s each, plus headquarters and reconnaissance elements. Unlike tank battalions permanently assigned to specific divisions, tank destroyer battalions functioned as General Headquarters reserve units, attached to divisions or corps as tactical situations required. Crew selection emphasized initiative and aggressive tactics. Tank destroyer doctrine, as taught at the Tank Destroyer Center, stressed the offensive employment of mobile anti-tank weapons. Commanders at all levels, from battalion to individual vehicle, received latitude to exploit tactical opportunities without waiting for higher authorization. The operational concept called for tank destroyer battalions to move rapidly to threatened sectors, establish ambush positions along expected enemy avenues of approach, engage enemy armor from advantageous positions, and withdraw before enemy forces could coordinate effective responses. This methodology differed fundamentally from the static defensive employment of towed anti-tank guns. Training emphasized several key tactical principles. First, achieve positional advantage before engagement, attack from flank or rear positions whenever possible. Second, minimize exposure time, remain in firing positions only long enough to engage targets effectively. Third, plan withdrawal routes before engaging. Every firing position required at least 2 prepared escape routes. Fourth, exploit terrain, use reverse slopes, vegetation, and structures to mask movement and firing positions. The first significant engagement involving M18 units occurred near Argentan during the Falaise Pocket operations in August 1944. Elements of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion intercepted German armored forces attempting to escape the pocket. The battalion's after-action report, filed with 7 Corps headquarters, documented the engagement of 8 Panzer IV tanks over an 11-minute period, resulting in 8 confirmed kills with no M18 losses. This engagement pattern, high German losses, minimal American casualties, repeated throughout August and September as Allied forces pursued German units across France. Tank destroyer commanders discovered that the M18's speed enabled tactical flexibility impossible with heavier vehicles. The ability to reposition rapidly between firing points prevented German forces from coordinating effective return fire. German Wehrmacht armor encounters France. September-October 1944 Wehrmacht armored units first encountered M18 tank destroyers in significant numbers during September 1944 as German forces attempted to establish defensive lines in eastern France. After-action reports from Panzer divisions engaged during this period documented a pattern of engagements characterized by brief contact durations and unfavorable exchange ratios. German tactical reports from the 11th Panzer Division, captured by American forces and preserved in captured document collections, described enemy tank destroyers appearing from concealed positions, firing several rounds, then disappearing before German crews could identify target locations. Initial reports attributed these incidents to combat stress or exaggeration. However, as similar reports accumulated from multiple Panzer divisions operating across different sectors, Wehrmacht intelligence staff recognized a systematic pattern. Statistical analysis of engagement reports from September 1944 indicated that German armored forces were experiencing contact durations with American tank destroyers averaging between 2 and 4 minutes. Within these brief windows, American vehicles achieved disproportionate kill ratios. The tactical problem centered on engagement timing. German doctrine, developed primarily on the Eastern Front, assumed engagement ranges exceeding 1,500 meters across open terrain. At such ranges, the superior optics, gun performance, and armor protection of Panther and Tiger tanks provided decisive advantages against Soviet armor. Western European terrain, the bocage hedgerows of Normandy, the forests of the Vosges, the narrow streets of French towns, reduced engagement ranges to 300–800 meters. At these distances, the M18's lighter armor became irrelevant, while its superior mobility and rate of fire became overwhelming advantages. German tank commanders reported frustration at their inability to achieve effective return fire. A typical engagement sequence, as reconstructed from multiple after-action reports, followed a consistent pattern: German column moving along a road or through open terrain, First indication of enemy presence, armor-piercing rounds impacting lead or trail vehicles. German tank commanders requiring 15-20 seconds to identify threat direction and issue fire commands. By the time German guns traversed to target bearings, American vehicles had displaced to new positions. The Panther tank's hand-cranked turret traverse mechanism, rotating at approximately 15 degrees per second, required 6 to 8 seconds to traverse 90 degrees. Combined with target acquisition time and firing preparation, total response time from initial contact to effective return fire averaged 25 to 35 seconds. During this window, M18s typically fired 2 to 3 rounds, then accelerated away. Wehrmacht intelligence staff analyzed captured American technical manuals and concluded that the M18's tactical employment represented a fundamentally different approach to armored warfare. Where German doctrine emphasized holding ground and fighting from strong defensive positions, American tank destroyer doctrine treated every position as temporary. The vehicles never remained static long enough for German forces to coordinate effective responses. M18 Tactical Doctrine and Crew Operations, 1944. The operational effectiveness of M18 battalions resulted from the integration of vehicle capabilities with tactical doctrine and crew training. Each 5-man crew underwent specialized training emphasizing speed of execution and tactical decision-making. The driver position required both technical skill and tactical awareness. Drivers trained to operate the vehicle at high speeds across varied terrain while maintaining awareness of tactical situations. The ability to execute rapid acceleration, emergency stops, and high-speed reversals while avoiding obstacles required extensive practice. Drivers memorized pre-planned withdrawal routes from firing positions, enabling rapid withdrawal without waiting for detailed directions. The assistant driver operated the bow machine gun, but primarily functioned as the driver's situational awareness backup. This crew member monitored the tactical situation, identifying threats and potential escape routes, while the driver focused on vehicle control. In the turret, the commander directed tactical operations, while the gunner and loader operated the main armament. The commander's position in the open turret provided excellent visibility, enabling rapid target acquisition and assessment of tactical situations. The commander directed driver movement, selected targets for engagement, and coordinated with other vehicles via radio. The gunner operated the gun elevation and traverse controls, aimed using the telescopic sight, and fired the main gun. Training emphasized rapid target acquisition and quick firing solutions. Unlike tank gunnery, which stressed precision at long ranges, tank destroyer gunnery training emphasized acceptable accuracy at medium ranges with minimal delay between target identification and rounds fired. The loader's responsibility included maintaining a high rate of fire. Loading the 76mm gun required physically handling 50-pound rounds while the vehicle maneuvered at high speeds across rough terrain. Well-trained loaders achieved loading times under 10 seconds consistently. Standard tactical procedures for M18 platoons, documented in tank destroyer field manuals, established systematic approaches to various tactical situations. For ambush operations, the preferred method involved reconnaissance elements identifying enemy approach routes, followed by M18s moving to pre-selected firing positions with planned withdrawal routes. The platoon would allow enemy forces to enter the engagement area before opening fire, typically engaging from flank or rear positions. Firing positions were selected based on several criteria: clear lines of fire to expected target areas, covered withdrawal routes, terrain features providing concealment, and sufficient spacing between vehicles to prevent multiple casualties from artillery fire. Each firing position required at least 2 alternate positions, connected by routes that could be traversed rapidly. Engagement procedures emphasized rapid firing, followed by immediate withdrawal. The standard sequence involved identify target, fire 2 to 4 rounds, begin withdrawal regardless of target status, move to alternate position via pre-planned route, assess results and select next position. The entire sequence typically required 30 to 50 seconds. German Panzer Forces countermeasures. October-November 1944 by October 1944, Wehrmacht armored forces had accumulated sufficient combat experience against M18 units to attempt systematic countermeasures. German tactical bulletins from this period, preserved in captured document archives, specified modified procedures for operations in sectors where American tank destroyer units were likely to be encountered. Recommended countermeasures included wider spacing between vehicles in column formations to prevent multiple casualties from single ambushes. Standard German practice called for vehicles to maintain 50-meter intervals. Revised guidance increased this to 100-150 meters when tank destroyer contact was likely. This spacing reduced the number of vehicles vulnerable to a single ambush, but complicated column command and control. Reconnaissance elements received orders to scout routes more aggressively before committing main armored forces. Light reconnaissance vehicles or infantry patrols would advance ahead of panzer columns to identify potential ambush positions. However, this procedure slowed overall movement rates and still provided limited protection against well-concealed tank destroyers. Artillery and mortar support received greater emphasis. When tank destroyer contact occurred, German forces attempted to saturate suspected firing positions with indirect fire rather than engaging with direct-fire tank guns. This proved somewhat effective when M18s remained in position too long, but had limited utility against vehicles that withdrew within seconds of firing. The most significant doctrinal change involved immediate withdrawal upon contact. Traditional German armored doctrine emphasized aggressive response to contact. Identify enemy positions, maneuver to favorable firing positions, destroy enemy forces. Revised guidance for operations against tank destroyers recommended breaking contact and withdrawing rather than attempting to engage. This represented a profound psychological shift for an army built on aggressive offensive doctrine. Some Panzer units achieved limited success through modified tactics. Smaller, more dispersed formations with aggressive forward reconnaissance occasionally detected M18 units moving into ambush positions before the Americans could establish firing positions. Immediate engagement during this vulnerable period occasionally resulted in M18 casualties. However, overall German effectiveness against M18 units remained limited. The fundamental problem, American speed and mobility advantages at typical Western European engagement ranges, had no doctrinal solution given existing German vehicle capabilities. Panthers and Tigers, designed for long-range engagements on the Eastern Front, could not be made faster or more maneuverable without complete redesign. Statistical analysis from late 1944, compiled by Wehrmacht Operational Research Staff, indicated that even with modified tactics, German armored forces continued to experience unfavorable exchange ratios when engaging M18-equipped units. The reports concluded that avoiding contact represented the most effective countermeasure, a remarkable admission for an army that had pioneered offensive armored doctrine. U.S. tank destroyer operations Battle of the Bulge. December 1944, the German Ardennes offensive, launched December 16, 1944, placed M18-equipped tank destroyer battalions in an unprecedented tactical situation. Rather than conducting offensive operations against withdrawing German forces, American tank destroyers found themselves in defensive positions against numerically superior German armored formations. The 634th Tank Destroyer Battalion deployed to the St. Vith sector on December 17th to reinforce American defensive positions. The battalion faced elements of the 6th SS Panzer Army, including substantial numbers of Panthers and Panzer fires from elite Waffen-SS divisions. Intelligence estimates indicated German armored strength in the sector exceeded 200 tanks. The tactical situation differed significantly from earlier M18 operations. Instead of conducting mobile ambushes against German columns in open terrain, tank destroyer units needed to defend specific positions against sustained assault. The frozen ground complicated digging defensive positions, and heavy snow reduced visibility that M18 crews typically exploited for situational awareness. Despite these challenges, M18 units adapted their tactics to defensive operations. Tank destroyer commanders selected firing positions, defending critical road networks, established multiple alternate positions for each platoon, and coordinated fields of fire to create interlocking engagement zones. The M18's speed remained an advantage, even in defensive operations. The ability to reposition rapidly between prepared positions prevented German forces from fixing American units in place. Engagement reports from the St. Vith sector documented patterns similar to earlier operations. M18 units would engage German armor from prepared positions, inflict casualties, then displace to alternate positions before German forces could coordinate effective return fire. The difference was that in defensive operations, M18 units returned to the same general areas rather than conducting continuous withdrawals. The 634th Tank Destroyer Battalion's after-action report, filed with V8 Corps after the battle, credited the battalion with destroying 53 German armored vehicles during operations around St. Vith between December 18, 23. The battalion lost 7 M18s during this period, 5 to enemy fire, 2 to mechanical failure. This maintained the favorable exchange ratios characteristic of M18 operations. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated that M18 effectiveness derived not solely from offensive mobility, but from the integration of vehicle capabilities with flexible tactics. Even in defensive situations, the speed advantage enabled tactical options unavailable to slower vehicles. Tank destroyer units could reinforce threatened sectors rapidly, withdraw from untenable positions before being overrun, and shift between positions to prevent German forces from achieving local superiority. M18 Tank Destroyer Battalions, Germany, January-May 1945 Allied forces advanced into Germany during early 1945. M18 equipped tank destroyer battalions continued offensive operations against diminishing German armored forces. However, the operational context shifted as German forces conducted fighting withdrawals with increasingly scarce armor assets. Tank destroyer units found fewer opportunities for the large-scale ambushes that characterized operations in France. German armored formations, severely depleted by months of combat and fuel shortages, operated in smaller units with more dispersed deployments. When German armor was encountered, it typically consisted of small battle groups, 2 to 4 tanks, rather than company or battalion-sized formations. M18 battalions adapted to these conditions by operating in smaller, more dispersed formations. Rather than platoon-level operations, 5 vehicles, tank destroyer commanders frequently deployed individual vehicles or 2 vehicle sections to cover wider areas. This deployment pattern reduced the concentration of firepower, but increased the geographic coverage and probability of encountering German armor. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion's operations in the Rhineland during February-March 1945 illustrate this evolution. The battalion operated across a front exceeding 40 kilometers, with individual platoons assigned to support different infantry regiments. M18s functioned primarily as mobile fire support, engaging German defensive positions, providing overwatch for infantry advances, and responding to occasional encounters with German armor. Engagement reports from this period documented fewer but still decisive encounters with German tanks. When contact occurred, M18 crews continued to demonstrate superior speed and tactical flexibility. However, the overall pace of armored combat declined as German forces lost their ability to conduct coordinated armored operations. One significant engagement occurred near Cologne in March 1945, when elements of the 704th encountered a German battle group, including 3 Panther tanks defending a river crossing. The resulting engagement lasted approximately 15 minutes, with all 3 Panthers destroyed and no M18 casualties. The engagement demonstrated that even late-war German crews, often poorly trained replacements, remained vulnerable to the tactical methods M18 units had perfected. By April 1945, organized German resistance in many sectors had collapsed. M18 battalions increasingly performed pursuit operations, advancing rapidly to secure objectives ahead of main Allied forces. The vehicles' high road speed enabled them to cover ground more quickly than infantry columns or conventional tank units, though fuel consumption at sustained high speeds created logistical challenges. German Armored Forces Assessment and Morale Impact. 1945 post-war interviews with surviving German Panzer commanders, conducted by Allied intelligence staff, revealed the psychological impact of facing M18 tank destroyers. Multiple commanders described the experience as fundamentally different from engaging Soviet armor on the Eastern Front. On the Eastern Front, even when outnumbered, German tank crews felt they possessed qualitative advantages: superior optics, better crew training, more effective armor protection. These advantages didn't guarantee victory, but provided confidence that skilled crews could achieve favorable outcomes against numerically superior Soviet forces. Against M18 units, German commanders reported feeling that no amount of skill or aggression could overcome the tactical disadvantage imposed by the American vehicle's speed. The inability to achieve effective return fire, the fundamental requirement for armored combat, created a sense of helplessness that eroded unit morale. One Panther battalion commander, interviewed in May 1945, stated that his crews had developed a practice of withdrawing immediately upon identifying M18 silhouettes, even when tactical situations nominally favored engagement. The crews had concluded that attempting to fight American tank destroyers resulted in losses without corresponding damage to enemy forces. This assessment appears validated by statistical analysis. Wehrmacht operational research staff compiled engagement data from multiple Panzer divisions operating in the Western Theater during 1944-45. The analysis indicated that German armored forces achieved approximately 4 out of 5% of the kill ratios against M18 units, compared to kill ratios achieved against Sherman tanks in similar tactical situations. The psychological dimension extended beyond individual crew morale to doctrine and training. By early 1945, German Panzer training emphasized avoiding engagement with identified tank destroyer units, a remarkable admission that certain enemy vehicles could not be effectively countered with existing German equipment and tactics. M18 combat performance, statistical analysis, European theater. 1944-1945 Army Ground Forces compiled comprehensive performance data for M18 equipped tank destroyer battalions following the conclusion of combat operations in Europe. The statistical analysis, completed in late 1945, provided quantitative assessment of the vehicle's effectiveness. Overall, M18 battalions in the European theater claimed destruction of approximately 526 German tanks and assault guns. Verification procedures, which required supporting evidence beyond individual crew claims, confirmed approximately 498 of these kills. M18 losses to all causes totaled approximately 216 vehicles, roughly 140 to enemy action, the remainder to mechanical failure, accidents, or other non-combat causes. This produced an overall loss exchange ratio of approximately 3.51. For every M18 lost to enemy action, German forces lost 3.5 armored vehicles. Some battalions achieved significantly better ratios. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion's confirmed kills exceeded 600 German armored vehicles across 11 months of operations, with battalion losses of approximately 53 vehicles, producing an 11.1 ratio. For comparison, M10 and M36 Tank Destroyer Battalions operating in the same theaters and time periods achieved loss exchange ratios of approximately 1.8.1 and 2.3.1 respectively. Sherman tank battalions averaged approximately 1.2.1. The M18's superior performance metrics stemmed directly from its mobility advantages and the tactical doctrine exploiting those advantages. Analysis of engagement distances indicated that M18 units typically initiated combat at ranges between 600–1,000 meters, close enough to guarantee penetration of German armor, far enough to provide time for withdrawal before effective German response. Average engagement duration measured approximately 45 to 60 seconds from first shot to withdrawal initiation. Crew casualty rates for M18 battalions tracked lower than conventional tank battalions despite the vehicle's thin armor. The statistical data suggests that mobility-based survivability proved more effective than armor-based protection in the tactical environments where M18s operated. Vehicles that avoided being hit entirely suffered fewer casualties than heavily armored vehicles that absorbed multiple hits. Mechanical reliability data indicated higher maintenance requirements compared to Sherman tanks. The M18's high power-to-weight ratio and sustained high-speed operations created greater mechanical stress. Average operational readiness rates for M18 battalions measured approximately 75–80%, compared to 85–90% for Sherman battalions. However, commanders generally considered the performance advantages worth the additional maintenance burden. M18 Hellcat deployment. Korean War 1950–1951. Several M18 equipped tank destroyer battalions deployed to Korea following the North Korean invasion in June 1950. The 773rd Tank Destroyer Battalion arrived at Pusan in August 1950, entering combat during defensive operations along the Pusan perimeter. The tactical situation in Korea differed substantially from European operations. North Korean forces employed Soviet-supplied T-34-85 medium tanks, which possessed thicker armor and more powerful armament than the German Panzer IV, but comparable protection to Panthers in frontal aspects. Korean terrain, mountainous with limited road networks, channeled armored operations into predictable routes. Initial engagements near the Naktong River in August 1950 demonstrated that the M18's 76mm gun remained effective against T-34-85 armor at typical engagement ranges. The 773rd Tank Destroyer Battalion's action reports from this period documented 17 confirmed T-34 kills during the first 2 weeks of operations, with 2 M18 losses. However, the Korean War also revealed limitations in the M18 design. By 1950, the vehicle was 6 years old, and both its armor protection and armament had become marginal against evolving threats. The arrival of Soviet-supplied IS-2 and IS-3 heavy tanks later in the war presented challenges that the 76mm gun could not consistently overcome. These vehicles possessed frontal armor exceeding 6 inches, which the M18's gun could not reliably penetrate. Additionally, the Korean War validated changing American doctrine regarding specialized tank destroyer units. Army staff studies conducted during 1950–51 questioned whether separate tank destroyer battalions remained necessary when newer main battle tanks could perform both anti-armor and general-purpose missions. The M46 and M47 Patton tanks entering service combined armor protection, 90mm guns capable of defeating any contemporary tank, and reasonable mobility. The last M18 battalion in U.S. Army service was deactivated in 1953. The Army concluded that the specialized tank destroyer concept, lightly armored, highly mobile vehicles optimized solely for anti-tank missions, no longer aligned with Cold War doctrine emphasizing versatile, multi-role armored vehicles. International M18 service and export. 1945–1975, following World War II, surplus M18 vehicles were transferred to various Allied nations through military assistance programs. These vehicles saw extended service in roles ranging from active combat to training and reserve units. The Chinese nationalist government received approximately 120 M18s during 1946–48, employing them during the Chinese Civil War. After retreating to Taiwan in 1949, remaining vehicles continued in service with the Republic of China Army until the mid-1960s, primarily in coastal defense roles. Yugoslavia acquired approximately 100 M18s through various channels between 1950–1952. The Yugoslav People's Army operated these vehicles until 1972, valuing their mobility in the mountainous terrain characteristic of the Balkans. Yugoslav maintenance depots developed extensive experience maintaining and overhauling the Continental radial engines, extending vehicle service lives considerably beyond original design expectations. Venezuela received approximately 50 M18s through U.S. military assistance during the 1950s. These vehicles remained in service through 1975, though by the 1970s they functioned primarily as training vehicles rather than frontline combat assets. The Venezuelan army eventually replaced them with more modern armored vehicles, with some M18s preserved as military museum pieces. Pakistan acquired a small number of M18s during the 1950s, though details of their operational employment remain limited. Some sources indicate Pakistani M18s saw combat during the 1965 Indo-Pakistani War, though verification of specific engagements is difficult. The extended international service life demonstrated the fundamental soundness of the M18 design. Despite being considered obsolete by US standards by 1953, the combination of mobility, firepower, and mechanical reliability remained useful for nations with limited defense budgets and specific tactical requirements. M18 Hellcat technical legacy and influence on post-war armored vehicle development. The M18's operational success influenced post-war armored vehicle development in ways that extended well beyond direct successes. Several design principles validated by the M18's combat record became standard considerations in post-war military vehicle development. The concept of optimizing vehicles for specific tactical roles rather than general-purpose employment gained credibility. The M18 demonstrated that a vehicle designed for one mission, destroying enemy tanks, could achieve superior performance compared to multi-role designs, making compromises to fulfill multiple missions. The emphasis on power-to-weight ratio as a primary performance parameter influenced subsequent light-armored vehicle development. The French AMX-13 light tank, developed in the late 1940s, incorporated similar design philosophy: lightweight, powerful engine, effective armament, and minimal armor. The vehicle achieved similar mobility advantages for its era that the M18 had demonstrated during World War II. Soviet post-war tank destroyer development showed awareness of lessons from the M18's success. The ASU-85 airborne assault gun, entering service in 1959, prioritized mobility and firepower while accepting minimal armor protection, a design philosophy consistent with the M18 approach, though applied to airborne operations. The hydraulic turret traverse system pioneered in the M18 became standard in post-war tank designs worldwide. The dramatic improvement in traverse speed and the ability to maintain target tracking while moving proved decisive advantages. By the 1960s, hydraulic or electric traverse systems had completely replaced hand-cranked mechanisms in modern tank designs. American armored vehicle development moved away from the specialized tank destroyer concept, but incorporated lessons regarding mobility and rapid engagement capabilities. The M551 Sheridan light tank, despite its troubled development, reflected similar prioritization of mobility and firepower over armor protection. M18 Hellcat historical assessment and preserved vehicles. 1945. Present historical assessment of the M18 Hellcat's significance has evolved over the decades since World War II. Contemporary wartime evaluation focused primarily on kill ratios and tactical effectiveness. Later analysis has examined the vehicle's role in validating alternative approaches to armored warfare doctrine. The M18 demonstrated that technological innovation, combined with appropriate tactical doctrine, could overcome apparent material disadvantages. The thin armor that seemed a fatal flaw in design reviews proved irrelevant in actual combat operations, where engagements occurred at close ranges and survival depended on not being hit rather than withstanding hits. Military historians have noted that the M18's success validated the importance of matching vehicle capabilities to actual operational environments rather than theoretical scenarios. German armor optimized for Eastern Front conditions proved poorly suited to Western European terrain. The M18, designed specifically for mobile operations in terrain that limited engagement ranges, proved ideally suited for its actual employment. The vehicle's operational record also highlighted the importance of crew training and tactical doctrine in determining combat effectiveness. M18 crews received specialized training emphasizing aggressive, independent action. Tank destroyer doctrine gave commanders at all levels latitude to exploit tactical opportunities. This combination of training and doctrine proved as important as the vehicle's technical characteristics. Several M18 vehicles survive in military museums and private collections. The U.S. Army Ordnance Museum at Aberdeen Proving Ground maintained a restored M18 until the facility's closure and relocation to Fort Lee, Virginia. Multiple American armor museums, including the American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts and the National Armor and Cavalry Museum at Fort Benning, Georgia, display restored M18s. Some surviving vehicles have been restored to operational condition by private collectors. These vehicles occasionally appear at military vehicle demonstrations and historical reenactments, providing contemporary audiences with opportunities to observe the M18's remarkable mobility firsthand. The most historically significant surviving M18 is likely the vehicle preserved at the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. This particular vehicle saw combat in Europe with the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion and carries original combat markings and battle damage documentation. Conclusion: M18 Hellcat Operational Significance. World War II Armored Warfare. The M18 Hellcat's operational deployment during 1944-45 demonstrated several enduring principles of armored warfare. Speed and mobility, when properly exploited through appropriate tactics, could substitute for armor protection in specific tactical contexts. The vehicle's success validated the concept that survivability could be achieved through avoiding enemy fire rather than withstanding it. The M18's combat record also illustrated the importance of matching vehicle design to actual operational requirements rather than theoretical scenarios. German tank designers, working from Eastern Front experience, created vehicles optimized for long-range engagements across open terrain. American tank destroyer designers, analyzing German blitzkrieg tactics, created vehicles optimized for rapid response and mobile operations in varied terrain. The tactical doctrine employed by M18 units, aggressive, independent action exploiting speed advantages to achieve favorable engagement conditions, became a model for subsequent mobile anti-tank operations. The principles of achieving positional advantage before engagement, minimizing exposure time, and maintaining tactical initiative through mobility proved applicable beyond the specific context of World War II tank destroyer operations. For the German tank crews who encountered M18 units during 1944-45, the experience represented a fundamental challenge to assumptions about armored warfare. The inability to achieve effective return fire against an enemy that appeared, fired, and disappeared within seconds created tactical problems that German doctrine provided no effective solutions for. The 3 minutes that German commanders estimated they had to engage M18 units before the American vehicles withdrew at 55 miles per hour became emblematic of a larger truth. In modern warfare, speed and adaptability could overcome advantages in armor and firepower when employed with appropriate tactics. The M18 Hellcat's legacy extends beyond its impressive kill-to-loss ratios. It demonstrated that innovative thinking about vehicle design and tactical employment could create capabilities that conventional wisdom dismissed as impossible. In that sense, the fastest tank destroyer of World War II remains a case study in military innovation and the integration of technology with doctrine to achieve operational effectiveness.